Channel 10, South Florida's most complete news service. This is News Watch.
Good evening. With Anna Asqui, I'm Art Carlson. Tonight, South Florida remains poised on the edge of receiving its first hurricane in 16 years. Hurricane David has already passed through the Bahamas, leaving flooded streets, toppled trees, and knocking out power. Communications with the out islands has been cut off completely. Hurricane David is headed towards South Florida and is about 175 miles offshore. This Sky 10 tape shows our area is already wet from rain squalls preceding the storm. Winds are picking up and trees are being buffeted about by a steady blow and an occasional strong gust of wind. Most streets are fairly deserted for this time of day. Most people are inside, either testing the work they've done to protect their homes or working at boarding up. Some residents of low-lying areas have already evacuated their homes and are headed for or already in various shelters available to those who cannot stay safely at home. These first tapes from Santo Domingo show the aftermath of Hurricane David, where at least 600 people were killed, many of them as they huddled together in a church trying to get away from the storm. The church was flooded. Many were unable to escape. Trees were toppled in the Dominican Republic. Homes were washed away. Power was knocked out. Military troops are working to clear up the area, helping those who are homeless or separated from their families. The Dominican Republic was hit by the full force of Hurricane David, and the devastating damage left in its wake is evident in those first reports from the island. Newswatch meteorologist Don No has been tracking Hurricane David all day as he moves closer to South Florida. Don's at the map now to tell us the latest. Don?
Thank you, Art. The latest coordinates on Hurricane David as of 6 o'clock tonight. The latest advisory, the numbers are north latitude 24.3, west longitude 78.0. And that puts the center of Hurricane David about 175 miles to the southeast of Miami. Now, the tracking movement of Hurricane David continues to be a northwest movement at 10 to 12 miles per hour. And at that rate, they are projecting now that the center of the hurricane could possibly pass over land if it were remaining on that track. If it does not deviate, which is a big if, the center of the hurricane could pass over someplace over southeast Florida about daybreak tomorrow. And that would be preceded by several hours by gale force winds and by squalls and, of course, a very, very heavy rain. Now, Andros Island just reported about an hour ago 80 to 90 mile-an-hour winds, and they think now that the hurricane is going to strengthen somewhat in the next several hours and over the night. So right now, the highest force winds are still 90 miles an hour for Hurricane David. It's moving northwest at about 10 to 12 miles per hour. And later on in News Watch, in the regular weather segment, I'll have an update not only on David, but also on the other hurricane, Hurricane Frederick, which is still threatening the Leeward Islands and the Lesser Antilles. Right now, let's have more on Hurricane David, and here's Anna.
As we've mentioned, the storm's about 165 miles away from us right now. And Don, what's the word? The radar showing anything picking up around here? We've had a lot of storms and rain today so far.
Well, we had one little squall go through about 1, 2 o'clock this afternoon.
I know, it was in the middle of it.
A lot of us probably wondered if that was the start of the hurricane, but no, it was not. It was the squalls that frequently precede hurricanes. And I think we're going to take a look at the radar right now, and we'll see what it looks like. And I believe the radar is on the 250-mile range, and all of that stuff that you can see off to the east of us is the leading edge of the hurricane. Now, the reason it is not completely symmetrical, that you don't see the whole circle, is because much of the rain is being what they call attenuated, and the radar echoes bounce off most of the heavy rain, very dense precipitation, and cannot penetrate it. So we're probably looking very close to the center, but probably not through the center of the hurricane. Now, if you notice the red spots off to the top, I'll wait till the sweep comes around and I'll tell you exactly what I mean. The red areas, those of you with color TV, that sweep on that spiral band right there through there. Okay, now that is the first, probably one of the stronger squalls that is expected to come through here later on this evening. It looks like it's still about 75, 100 miles offshore from the looks of that. And that probably contains winds of, at least the gale force winds, which is 35 miles per hour or above. So that's the live radar picture of the hurricane, and I'm sure we're going to be checking in with that throughout the night. You can see that it is definitely on the way, and it's probably going to arrive here sometime after midnight tonight. They're right now forecasting that the eye of the hurricane will pass someplace close to South Florida around dawn tomorrow.
South Florida's lucky streak finally ran out.
I think so.
All right. Thank you, Don. Anna?
Channel 10, WPLG, Miami, Fort Lauderdale. From Channel 10, this is Eyewitness News at 6 with John Scott, Diane Magnum, meteorologist Brian Norcross, Frank Ford, and the Channel 10 Eyewitness News team.
Good evening. I'm Diane Magnum. John Scott is off tonight and Art Carlson is joining us. She is now a major hurricane. Elena is packing sustained winds of 125 miles an hour.
She has changed course and is now heading on a west-northwesterly direction. Hurricane warnings have been dropped for Tampa but added for areas west of Panama City. Meteorologist Brian Norcross is standing by at the map right now with absolutely the latest. Brian?
All right, here's the latest satellite picture. There's the center of the storm, the eye showing up very well. Apalachicola located right here, and you see the center of the storm is just south of Apalachicola. The strongest winds are around that eye. Now, I want to go back, take you back to this morning at 3 a.m., and you can see how fast the storm has moved during the day today. There's the little eye. Now, watch it as we go through the day, every hour. Now, there comes the eye as it really develops and the winds build, and now it's really taking off to the northwest up to about 10 to 15 miles an hour, and the projected course is going to take it into the Pensacola area with 125-mile-an-hour winds. The hurricane warnings in effect from Gulfport, Mississippi, on around to Yankeetown, Florida. That's about 70 miles up the coast from Tampa, and gale warnings still extend on down the coast of Fort Myers, but we'll have lots more and the 6 o'clock coordinates for you coming up in just a few minutes.
1 p.m.
All we seem to be able to say is how lucky we are here in South Florida. You look at those pictures.
Boy, I tell you, and you can see the thing has turned into a real circle, you know, and it's really intensifying, and the winds are up to 125, gusting to 150 now, and it's really a big problem in Apalachicola. Take a look at what's going on in South Florida. All we have are Miami conditions because everything's so going on so crazy down at the Hurricane Center. 88 barometer falling, humidity 62%, wind out of the south at 16, and the surf temperature 85. I want to take you back to where this thing started, this tropical storm, Elena, down over Cuba. Now, as we go through the day late last week, moved up in the Gulf, turned into a hurricane south of Pensacola, and they evacuated the Gulf Coast, if you remember. Then took a hard right, headed toward the Florida coast, and stalled there yesterday, and then turned back around. And here we are right now, located just south or southwest of Apalachicola. Back to 5 o'clock yesterday morning on the satellite sequence. This is a long one. Here you see the storm move over to the coast, and now it's developing, becoming more circular, and then moving back out to the northwest or west-northwest. So there's the eye, very obvious. As it developed through the day today. The other thing to look at is look at the high pressure pushing in here. It's actually building down the Florida coast, and that's what prevented the storm from going any further east than it did. As far as the coordinates and so forth, if you're plotting it with us, winds 125 miles an hour with gusts to 150, moving west-northwest 10 to 15. Latitude is 29.3 north, longitude 85.5 west. Locates that 45 miles to the southwest of Apalachicola. Now, it is moving right in the direction of Pensacola and is forecast to go ashore in the Pensacola-Mobile area. Let's check where the hurricane warnings are in effect now. They go from Gulfport, Mississippi, on over to Yankeetown, Florida, Yankeetown being about 70 miles up the coast from the Tampa-St. Petersburg area, and gale warnings in effect around the mouth of the Mississippi River, and then from Yankeetown on down to Fort Myers. The gale warnings are still up over there now, and if you're planning any boating, they still have high winds and very high seas all over the Gulf. As a matter of fact, we have high seas off our shore as well. Now, there are other things to look at with this storm. First of all, look at the winds in the red area. This is where the hurricane-force winds are. They've had winds up to 95 miles an hour there at Apalachicola. Gales well up into Alabama, Georgia, still in the Tampa Bay area, over into Gainesville, up into Lake City, and pushing in down to the Pensacola area. The winds should die down as the storm moves on out, but this is a big and growing storm, so even though it is moving away, the winds aren't dying down quite as fast. There's been, of course, severe weather reported with the storm as well, and a tornado watch continues in effect for most of the northern part of the peninsula, and we have some heavy thunderstorms just to the north of us with the storm. Here are just a few of the reports. At Jacksonville, you saw the tornado report there, and 10.16 inches of rain officially recorded at Jacksonville for the storm so far over 3 days, and they'll probably get close to 15 inches. McClenny, that's to the west of Jacksonville, I-10 is closed there, so if you're thinking about driving north, the Highway Patrol does not want you to do that because some of the interstates are closed. Apalachicola gusts to 95 miles an hour, and the report from the National Weather Service office there is they're okay, but the buildings are in bad shape around them, and they've seen buildings coming apart downtown. That's what they said, coming apart downtown. So as the storm moves on away now, the rains are going to continue because the storm is growing, and we have these feeder bands of rain. That's Jacksonville happened to be over one most of the day. Look at our radar here, and you can see one of those feeder bands. Here it comes right here from Vero Beach on down to the western parts of Broward County, but it's moving mostly to the northeast. I don't think most of metropolitan Miami or Fort Lauderdale will see it. Let's go on now to our forecast for South Florida. Planning any boating, the high winds and seas are going to continue all around Florida for the rest of today, and small craft should remain in port. Winds out of the south 20 to 25, seas 5 to 8 feet. Inland bays will be choppy. So once again, planning boating tomorrow. It's going to be a little choppy out there, but not too bad. The forecast now doesn't look too bad for South Florida. A few storms around, mostly north of us. Muggy tonight, low about 80. Tomorrow, a mixture of clouds and sun, hazy and humid, just a few storms. Looks pretty good, really, 90. And the extended forecast looks very good if the storm continues the way it's going. That's your look at the weather. We'll check it again later on. Now, here's Art.
All right, Brian, thank you very much. We have time now for a final look at how the folks are faring along the coast in the wake of Elena.
And for that, let's go live now to Eyewitness News reporter Susan Candiotti, who comes to us via NewsSat 10. Susan?
Thank you, Diane. Even though hurricane warnings were lifted from here about 2 hours ago, gale warnings are still up. As a matter of fact, just a couple minutes ago, it was raining very, very hard here. But of course, the conditions now look nothing like they did about 24 hours ago when I joined you from the same general area. Just about an hour ago, city officials met in an emergency meeting and lifted the evacuation order. That means area residents can start returning to their homes. If their homes look all right, if the damage isn't too bad, they will be allowed to go home and remain there. Emergency shelters will remain open on an as-needed basis. Now, taking a look at some of the damage here just to prove to you what emergency preparation means. If you can prepare for it, that's fine. If you can't, take a look at what happened to this boat. And here's some folks who own this boat here. Can you briefly come over here and tell me how bad things look?
Well, it looks terrible. I think it's a total loss. There's nothing left. The hull is all broke. The sides are broke. Everything is just destroyed on the boat. And it was hanging out there on those davits. How it wound up here, I don't know.
See that? It blew apparently over here all this way. Many similar stories being told in this city. However, finally, with the evacuation order being lifted, life will soon be going back to normal, we all hope. Back to you.
Susan, I'm assuming this is the first real storm you've been into, a hurricane like this. Were you at all prepared for the ferocity of it?
Apparently, I've lost hearing.
Well,
looks like we've lost
such are the vagaries of live television. All right, that's Susan Candiotti reporting live.
From your 24-hour news source, this is the Channel 4 News Nightcast. Number 1 at 11 with Tom Randalls, Kelly Craig, meteorologist Brian Norcross, weather, Tony Segreto, sports, and the Channel 4 News team.
The season's first tropical storm moves closer to the southeast U.S., but will it hit and where? Nobody knows. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Tracking Tropical Storm Andrew, the latest advisory is just in. Team coverage begins now with meteorologist Brian Norcross.
Kelly, we have the latest information, and it's been a very interesting evening here with Andrew. Top winds now at 65 miles per hour. That's up just a little bit. Moving to the west-northwest, about 10 miles per hour. That's slightly faster, although not much. Here we've located it for you. You see the track making a little bit of a bend in a more westerly direction, putting it about 750 miles to the east of us here in southeast Florida. I say it's been interesting because look at the satellite sequence. So we go this afternoon. There was the eye right there. And remember, the brighter the colors there, the more intense thunderstorms. And clearly through the evening this evening, the number of intense thunderstorms has been decreasing on the satellite, and the system has been getting more ragged. But in spite of that, the pressure's been going down and the wind speed is up just a little bit. So it's sort of a conflict going on there. Also, I think you can see a little bit of a turn to the left there. Now, what does all that mean, and why do we have that conflict going on? We have Miles Lawrence with us from the National Hurricane Center. Miles, isn't that an unusual sort of situation? Are you seeing that on your satellite there, the sort of decrease in the amount of thunderstorm activity?
Yes, the satellite presentation is not very impressive tonight, and as you mentioned, in spite of that, the pressure has dropped 3 millibars during the past 6 hours, and on that basis, we've upped the wind 5 miles an hour.
Now, you have aircraft in there pretty much continuously, is that right?
Yes, about every 3 hours, we're sending a plane into the center of the storm.
All right, the system, you've increased its forward speed a little bit, but on the models here that we're looking at, and also I know what you have there, it's showing high pressure is tending to push on it. You expect that forward speed is going to eventually decrease?
Yes, the increase in forward speed during the past several hours has been very small, only 1 mile per hour, and we've got it up to 10 miles per hour. Now, all of our guidance suggests that it's going to slow down slower than the 10 miles an hour that it's moving now.
Now, this sort of disruption in the circulation of the storm we're seeing on the satellite, are you taking that as a temporary thing? And we've seen that several times with this storm. It's been kind of a coming and going kind of thing.
Yes, the storm has kind of like been sputtering for several days now. and perhaps this is temporary. We believe that in the big picture that the environmental conditions are not hostile for further development over the next couple of days.
All right, Miles, of course, we'll stay in close touch with you folks down there. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
All right, we'll have the coordinates for you coming up in just a few minutes, and we'll have also other views of the thing and give you an idea where we think it might be going over the weekend. Have that for you, Jerry.
Okay, Brian, thank you. Well, what should you do if Tropical Storm Andrew becomes a direct threat to South Florida? Team coverage continues with Channel 4's Brian Allen.
If you did not lay in supplies when hurricane season started June 1st, you may want to seriously think about stocking up this weekend. With Andrew lurking in the Atlantic, it is not too late to get you and your house ready. It is too late to have storm shutters installed. But if you get up and head out to a lumberyard tomorrow, you can still protect your windows. So far, the rush to get the plywood, to get the windows boarded up, hasn't been that rapid. One thing you got to remember, though, is if you come out looking for the plywood, you're going to have to give them some time. Each piece has got to be cut to fit your window. Then you've got to go home and drill the holes to get the window ready so you can cover it. A couple other things, though, you need to get is water. At least 2 quarts per person per day. Also food, candles, matches, and also a radio, just so you can keep tuned of what's going on. Also, plenty of batteries. But one of the biggest priorities, though, will be the plywood. And if Andrew starts to bear down, this place will be a zoo. You will also want to have duct tape, a fire extinguisher, a first aid kit, and canned or packaged food on hand. If you take prescription medication, make sure you have extras. The best advice is not to wait until the last minute. If Andrew becomes a threat, stores will be crowded and items will be snatched up right away.
I'm just gonna wing it. I don't know. I'm gonna do my best and hope I don't get in any trouble.
In Miami, Brian Allen, Channel 4 News.
And just a reminder, our weekend watch begins at sunrise tomorrow. Starting at 6 a.m., we'll have live updates, including the latest from the National Hurricane Center. That's tomorrow morning at 6 on the weekend edition of Today in South Florida.
24-hour news source. Channel 4 News continues.
Brian Norcross here with an Andrew update. Not the easiest storm to follow, Brian.
Well, because it's acting a little bizarrely. You know, weak storms do this kind of thing because they're just on the fringe of hanging together. But it's still a potent enough system that we got to pay attention to it.
Right.
And I would give it an equal chance anywhere in Florida at this point.
Despite what you're seeing tonight.
Despite what we see tonight, where it seems like it's going north, it's still far enough away, and the systems are variable enough and unreliable enough and unpredictable enough that we still have to say an equal chance just about anywhere along the Florida coast. But so when is it going to be where, and is it going to hit anywhere? If we were to ask what are the possibilities, is it going to hit anybody? I would say most likely yes. Somebody is going to get a storm out of this. Is there about an equal chance that we're going to get it versus Jacksonville versus maybe even as far north as Charleston? Yes, I would say that's true too. Now, here's where we see the storm locating on one of those lines at those times. Starting with tomorrow afternoon, we expect a hurricane, Andrew, at that time, and we expect it to be right where you see that dashed line. Then by Sunday afternoon, approaching the Bahamas in the worst case if it was as far to the left as possible. And by Monday afternoon, very close to the northern Bahamas if it's the far left end of that line or the bottom end of that line. So if it were to go a little bit faster, of course, the Bahamas would be threatened by Monday, and we could be threatened, or the east coast of Florida by late Monday with just a little increase in forward speed. So over the weekend, everybody in the state of Florida needs to pay close attention to Andrew. Let's check outside now, and then I'll get the coordinates for you, and you can go ahead and plot it with us. 82 is our current temperature, and the humidity is 82%. Winds out of the southeast at only 2 miles an hour. Barometer is rising, and just a trace of rain in our rain gauge here with a little shower that came through this morning. And the Clearview radar is showing you lots of showers have developed offshore in just the last couple hours, and they're going to move in. We're going to have the same kind of situation with some pretty good showers around here first thing in the morning. Okay, here's the story on Andrew now. You want to plot it with us at 25.6 north, 66.5 west, top winds up just a little bit to 65 miles an hour, moving west-northwest at 10. We put it about 750 miles to the east of Miami, and there's the pressure, which has gone down fairly significantly in the last few hours, in spite of the fact that the satellite, which we'll show you in just a second, is looking much more ragged, and the weather systems are, as I was saying, are really hard to plot exactly. Now, I've put them on the wide view of the satellite picture here to give you an idea what's going on currently. Now, currently, I want to stress currently, because here we have a little high pressure system, just a little one tucked up just to the northwest of Andrew, and that's going to try and keep Andrew from going too far in that direction. Here we have an area of low pressure. You see all these clouds, and then another big high up to the north, nosing in and trying to nose down, right down there, around the back of Andrew, and that would tend to kind of push it, scoot it along. Well, into the future, what we think is going to happen is this low pressure is going to go away. These two highs are going to merge and end up being a big high pressure system over the top of Andrew. The question is, how strong is that high going to be? That's really the bottom line. Now, let's look at the satellite picture. Starting a little earlier this afternoon, there was the eye right there. Now, watch as we go through the day here today and then through the evening hours. And what you see is the amount of color in the picture is shrinking, indicating not as many strong thunderstorms, but still plenty of spiral action in the storm there, and the aircraft in the storm is measuring pretty strong winds, so that's why we think that things are going to continue to develop. Now, here we go on the other satellite picture, the wide view. Here's that high to the north I was telling you about, and you notice it's trying to nose down over here and kind of get behind Andrew and kind of create a shield over the top and keep it from going any further to the north or much further north. But, of course, a little bit of an angle difference makes a lot of difference once you get out 700 miles. And that's why it's very, very hard to tell. That little bit of difference just doesn't make any significant amount of statistical difference in the long range. So we got to stay on top of this thing over the weekend and just see exactly what happens. For the boaters, east winds over the weekend at 10 to 15 knots, 2 to 4 feet in the open sea, moderate chop in the bay, 87 degrees in the surf. Tonight, a few showers moving in. A couple of them could be pretty heavy, about 78. 90 tomorrow and on Sunday, kind of off and on sunshine, and some storms again first thing in the morning near the coast, inland in the afternoon. We'll be here all weekend long, and we hope you will be too, and keep you up to date. Jerry and Kelly.
Okay, Brent, thanks.
That is the Channel 4 News Nightcast. The Tonight Show with Jay Leno is next.
And be sure to tune in for Today in South Florida tomorrow morning at 6. Good
morning. This is News 4 at noon, with continuing coverage of Hurricane Lili.
South Florida is spared the wrath of Hurricane Lili, but Cuba not as lucky. Today, the island is being bullied by the storm, causing severe flooding and damage. Good afternoon. South Florida can relax. Hurricane Lili is no longer a direct threat to us, but it is a different story for Cuba and its next target, the Bahamas. News 4 Chief Meteorologist Brian Norcross kicks off our team coverage with the very latest information on Lili.
Elena, Lili has made yet another turn here this noontime, and I'm not exactly sure what that means for the Bahamas, but it means Cuba is going to continue to get battered. Let's take a look at the radar. We're looking out of Key West. This is the eye of Lili. Now, we had anticipated that Lili would move northeast across the island, emerging somewhere to the east of Havana. But that has not happened. Watch as we look through the last 3 hours. Notice that Lili is moving directly to the east and maybe even a little bit of a turn to the southeast, just a little bit on the last few pictures there. Now, all the models still indicate that the storm will emerge from the Cuban mainland there and on out into the Atlantic, but this turn to the east and the southeast may be good news for Nassau. It certainly is good news for us here in southeast Florida because it's keeping this very strong feeder band here offshore, and now, as you can see, we're almost going past us here in Dade-Broward County. That's going to alleviate the threat of that very, very heavy rain coming in here. Now, some other more minor feeder bands are developing and may very well bring us some pretty good showers and thunderstorms, and some of those thunderstorms could be heavy, but not this massive rain that we had thought yesterday would indeed come over us. As we look at the Keys here, we see there's a pretty good line of showers here affecting the lower middle Keys and some more just offshore, and then some other ones just now developing, but again, we think that the heavy, heavy stuff will stay offshore. Here in the satellite picture now, you can see the rotation center right in there. Now it's getting somewhat disrupted by the mountains of central Cuba in here, and the longer it stays over the mainland, the more weakening we expect to see, although we have not seen a lot of weakening yet. It's still a very well-developed storm. But again, with Nassau, New Providence right up here, the more of an eastward movement it takes, the better it is for them. And, of course, the folks further south in the Bahamas certainly need to be concerned. So all interests in the central Bahamas need to be paying very close attention. Here are the numbers as of 11 o'clock, 22.4, 81.1, 90-mile-an-hour winds moving to the east at 9, again, east right along the Cuban mainland there. There's the pressure, 975 millibars, 155 miles to the south-southeast of Key West. So the threat to the Keys also dramatically diminished. And still, though, with the tropical storm warning in the Keys, the possibility of some tropical storm winds and some squalls, but likely that will be dropped here later on today. Hurricane warnings in effect for all of the northern and central Bahamas, also for much of Cuba, but it looks like to me the northern Bahamas may be in better shape here. So with this turn to the east, this early turn to the east, the central Bahamas, certainly some concern. Now what's happening is this very strong cold front that's driving south, and the associated upper level winds are pushing Lili to the east, and once this gets a little further south, it's going to pick up Lili and zoom it across the Bahamas. So it's going to really move fast. You folks in the Bahamas, bear that in mind right now, just coming on in. And this cold front will also bring us some storms. Joe Haynes will have more on that in a little bit. So here's where we see it early tomorrow, leaving the Bahamas. So you folks in the Bahamas, be ready for it. It's going to come your way in a big hurry. All right, Joe Haynes back with more in just a little bit.
Thanks, Brian. We want to remind you.
And as usual, starts off the top of the hour for us. Brian.
All right, we have the new advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Wilma is strengthening and picking up forward speed. And here are the new numbers. The latitude is 23.9. The longitude is 84.4. And the top winds now 110 miles per hour. That's at the very top end of the Category 2 scale. So it would seem that there is a brief opportunity here for Wilma to become a Category 3 hurricane, moving to the northeast at 15 before this jet stream comes into play and then takes away that opportunity. 958 millibars is the pressure, so again, it's just trending down slightly, but that is expected to reverse as well and come back up here in the next 12 hours or so. Category 2, 170 miles west-southwest of Key West is the center of the storm. Now here you see the future track, and the future track has not changed. And if you're just tuning in, we've been on the same schedule for some time. The storm expected to be in the vicinity of the lower Keys in the overnight hours, and the tropical storm force winds arriving in the lower Keys around midnight, and then in the vicinity of the southwest coast sometime around sunrise or in the early morning hours, and then spreading on across the state and picking up speed so that it's on off the state on Monday afternoon. And Monday afternoon, we'll be on the backside of it here, but still we expect to have strong winds based on what's going on now with the winds down in Cuba, where in Havana, they just had hurricane force gusts well down on the bottom side of the storm. This is a very large windstorm, and so we're going to be dealing with it even if the center doesn't come right over top of us like Katrina did, for example. We expect winds comparable or higher to Katrina's winds even without a direct hit, so to speak. Now, as far as looking into the future, the storm is going to take off like a rocket ship up the East Coast, and it looks like the center will stay offshore. But again, this is going to be a very, very large windstorm, and it may very well be felt in a significant way in New England and even on Long Island and New York as it goes on by on Tuesday. So just bear that in mind if you're heading up that way. All right, now in terms of the winds and how we expect them to arrive, here they are now. And you see that the tropical storm force winds have already arrived in Key West on occasion. It's just the edge there of the tropical storm force area. And we had the tropical storm force gusts just a little while ago. And let me tell you what it is there right now. Now, the winds are at 37, gusting to 51 at Key West. So good, solid tropical storm force wind gusts. And at Miami, they're gusting to 31, so the winds are definitely coming up here now as the hurricane gets closer. So 51-mile-an-hour wind gusts at 8 o'clock at the Key West International Airport. Now, as the storm moves toward us in the early morning hours, there's how we expect it to arrive. Something like that, plus or minus a little bit, with the center of rotation being somewhere in here, coming across just south of Naples on the current track. Could be a little north, could be a little south. Hurricane force winds early in the morning over the Keys and then spreading
over Dade and Broward County as we get later on in the day, later on in the morning hours, and into the afternoon hours. So the worst weather in Miami-Dade and Broward should be in the morning after sunrise through into the afternoon hours, and then improving dramatically in the evening. We expect about 6 hours possible of hurricane force winds here, but the winds are going to be strong for longer than that. But the real winds that rattle the shutters and really make you want to stay out, stay inside, those are the, you know, and you go, oh, what is going on outside? Those we expect to last for about 6 hours. And as far as how strong the storm is going to be, this is not updated on the 8 o'clock advisory. This will be updated at 11. Category 2 storm approaching, although as we've seen, it has an opportunity to be a Category 3 here. It's going to be very close. But we always say that plus or minus 1 category on the intensity forecast. So it may make the line of Category 3, but in any case, it's expected to weaken as it speeds on across Florida. So down to about a Category 2 at landfall, and then exiting over here as a Category 1. In Miami-Dade and Broward, expecting the storm to be on the order of a strong Category 1 or weak Category 2 as it goes on by. Now, if you're in the Keys and looking at this, you might say, oh boy, the track is not now over the Keys, but this is just the center. And even if the storm were to go there or up here, the wind is so big that it's still going to push the water into Florida Bay in a significant way and still have significant storm surge. You are right that the odds of the storm going directly, the center of the storm going directly over the Keys is not as high, but in actual fact, the higher storm surge will come if it goes just north of the Keys, higher storm surge in Florida Bay, because it's the right side of the storm that pushes that water forward because of the circulation going in a counterclockwise way around the storm. All right, here's the radar since noon, and watch the one band went through Key West. Those were the first tropical storm force winds. And now there's another strong band approaching Key West now. And notice things are happening pretty fast. And now we can actually see the eye of the storm here. And that looks like it's going to track something like this. But now we'll be able to track it minute by minute here as we go through the next, let me see, about trying to guess how long we're going to be at this now. Another, I would say, 20 hours or so, and it should be really improving by that time. We also have a pretty good batch here that is heading north, and this may affect Miami-Dade and Broward, but obviously this is where the main weather is here. And in these bands we're looking at right here, these individual cells, these are where we might see some tornadoes, so we'll have to watch for that very, very closely. We've been looking at that with real-time radar here, and we have seen some rotation in those cells, and the National Weather Service has put out notices of that possibility. On the satellite picture, here you see it spiraling and speeding up. Look at it going faster, slow, slow, fast, 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 faster, as it's moving in the direction of southeast Florida. There you see it there, and we now see these bright purples around much of the center, and as we've talked about, that's an indication of a stronger storm. The more solid the dark purples are in our color scheme here around the center, the stronger the hurricane. And when we had that Category 4, Category 5 version of this hurricane, it was just a solid dark purple there, but obviously fragmented now because we only have a strong Category 2 hurricane at the present time. So still the storm surge issue is still in effect. They've increased the storm surge forecast on the last advisory. Now, let me just check to be sure, because the storm surge forecast now is exactly the same. 9 to 7 feet just south of the storm, 5 to 8 feet in Florida Bay. Again, depending on landfall. If the landfall does drop down some, that will put more water in Florida Bay. But remember, waves on top of that, and then 2 to 4 feet on the base, the ocean side of the Keys, and then also 2 to 4 feet along the southeastern coast, Miami-Dade and Broward, arriving, the storm surge starting to arrive, the sort of starting to be pushed in at about midnight with the southeast wind, where then when we go to a south wind and that water can get pushed up Biscayne Bay, that's when the most significant flooding is expected in Biscayne Bay, late in the overnight or to near sunrise. So it'll be an overnight to sunrise situation and may even last into the morning hours. Now, the other issue is the tornado issue. We've talked about this in terms of the history of hurricanes coming from this direction and involving cold fronts. Hurricane Isabel in 1964 was one of them that produced 6 tornadoes. And they were all significant tornadoes, or all reasonably strong tornadoes, stronger than our normal tornadoes. Our normal tornadoes are normally F0 tornadoes, about 60-mile-an-hour tornadoes. These were F2. 2 of them were F2. The other ones were F1s. And all of those are capable of damage. Obviously, a tornado that has 150-mile-an-hour winds is capable of significant damage. So it looks like that's beginning to develop, that kind of weather pattern, so we'll continue to have to watch that very, very closely. All right, let's leave it there. And
CBS 4 Chief Meteorologist Craig Setzer, and the new advisory just in from the National Hurricane Center. Craig.
The new advisory is in, and I wish I could say, guess what? There's been a shift in the track. There's a little change here. There's a little change there. It is basically just the same as earlier, and I'll show you that in just a second. First off, let's update where the storm is. Located right now 55 miles to the east-northeast of San Juan, Puerto Rico. Still 185-mile-an-hour winds, moving to the west-northwest at 16, Category 5. And we're going to start talking about the latitude and longitude here, because those numbers are going to be things that we watch closely in terms of the latitude being how far north or south the storm is going, and the longitude, and that's the west number. We expect this number to come up slowly, the longitude number to come up more quickly, because the storm is moving quicker west than it is moving to the north. But eventually, that number there will start going more quickly, the latitude, so it'll be going more north, and this number here will slow down. And that's the turn. That's what we're going to be concerned about, where that turn takes place, because if this number is between about 78 and 80, that means that it's south or just a little south-southeast of South Florida. I'll show you that as we get to the future track. Here's where it is right now. There is the storm size, the tropical storm force winds. Here's the new future track now. This is the Thursday afternoon time frame. It looks like the center of the storm is going to stay to the north of Hispaniola. Sometimes we have storms that go over this very mountainous island of the northern Caribbean, which disrupts the circulation. There may be a little bit of disruption as it passes, but since the core is not going over, there won't be a significant disruption. Only disruption would be that winds have to come down the mountain into the storm. Sometimes there's a little bit of a drying effect to that. After that, it's through the Turks and Caicos Thursday night, where there could be a catastrophic storm surge with it. Storm surge over 20 feet possible in there, the southeast Bahamas as well as the Turks and Caicos. This is the Friday afternoon time frame here. And now you can see the cone is getting a little bit further north of Cuba. Before it was closer to Cuba, now a little bit further north. Here is the Saturday afternoon time frame, and you can start to see the makings of the turn. There's our Friday position, there's our Saturday position, Category 4, the forecast intensity. At this point, could it keep going a little bit further south? Still a possibility. Could it keep going north? Still a possibility, and then turn there. But here is our Sunday. That's at 2 p.m. This, if you remember from the 11 a.m. advisory, that was almost identical to the forecast point, our 4-day forecast point. That is Sunday afternoon. So it is the Hurricane Center forecasters thinking that this is their best guess for where the center of Irma will be at 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. Now, this far out, 4 days out, there's some error. That's why we have the cone, because the center could be over here. It could be out here to the east, but this is not a good sign for us. And that black line right there, that is 80. This black line right here, that's 25, and so that's the number we're going to be watching. As it gets close to 80, you can see it's due south of Florida, so we want it to stay, that number to stay over here in the 70s, not get to around 80, because that'll be going towards South Florida. If it crosses 80 and keeps going, that's not a bad thing, but that 80 number is going to be something we're going to be watching closely. And then after that, it is to the north, and could be right along the coast. If it's offshore, but it's probably a due northerly motion, and there is still some possibility that the west coast of Florida could feel the impact there with the core of the storm. Here's the latest hurricane force wind swath, and basically I've outlined the cone here because the cone tracks the center, but this area right here, especially that red area, that is the highest likelihood of winds greater than 75 miles an hour sustained. That means it's blowing 75, gusting higher. And as we go through time here and the storm gets closer, that red increasingly more and more close to South Florida, but you can almost make out the outline of where the core of the storm right now in this forecast is expected to be. Here's the latest radar from San Juan, and you can see the core of Irma just to the northeast there, and it looks like the core itself, where the worst of the weather is, the highest of the winds, is probably going to stay just offshore, and that would be a good thing. This second band here is pretty strong, by the way, and so the wind's coming up quite a bit in Puerto Rico. There is the loop, and pretty spectacular from a meteorological point of view looking hurricane. You can see it there, and you take that and kind of move it over here, and you can see how things stack up there. So our timeline remains unchanged with the new advisory. Through tomorrow, hot sun and some storms. Friday, still hot sun and some storms. Friday is our last good weather day for preparation. Saturday, the winds increase, the squalls increase. You want to be where you're going to stay and wait out the storm and not venture out. I would say right now by noon on Saturday, if it speeds up, it could be earlier, but let's have everybody where they're going to be by Saturday morning where they need to be.